The darkness swallowed me whole before I even had a chance to say goodbye. My name is Tarvanek Saluri, and what I am about to tell you is not a story I rehearsed in front of a mirror. It is not something I embellished to make myself sound brave or holy or chosen. I am none of those things. I am a 43-year-old man from a small coastal city where the wind smells like salt and rust, where the men in my family were raised to be hard and quiet, where faith was a word you said at funerals but rarely lived between them. I say this because I need you to understand exactly who walked into that hospital room and exactly what came out on the other side. I was not a good man. I want to start there, because everything that follows depends on you understanding that clearly. I was not a man who hurt strangers on the street. I was not the kind of man who made headlines, but I was the kind of man who smiled at his wife while keeping secrets that would have shattered her. I was the kind of man who prayed on Fridays and then spent the rest of the week building a version of himself that had nothing to do with God. I was the kind of man who used religion like a coat you put on when the weather looks bad and hang back up the moment you feel warm again. I knew the words, I knew the movements. I had memorized the sounds of devotion without ever once letting them change the direction of my feet. That is who I was on the Tuesday morning when my heart stopped for the first time. It happened without drama. That is the thing nobody tells you about dying. It does not arrive with a soundtrack. I was standing in my kitchen, reaching for a glass on the upper shelf, and then something inside my chest made a sound that I can only describe as a door closing very far away. Not a slam, not a bang, just a soft, definitive click. And then the floor came up to meet me. My neighbor, Orvetha Camps, a retired school teacher with a habit of bringing over bread she baked on slow mornings, happened to be knocking on my door at that exact moment. She heard the fall. She called for help. The paramedics arrived in 7 minutes, which I know because they told me later, and by the time they reached me, I had been gone for somewhere between 9 and 10 minutes, according to the medical team that worked on me. 9 to 10 minutes. I need you to sit with that number for a moment before I continue, because in that window of 9 to 10 minutes, I did not float above my body and watch the paramedics work. I did not drift through a warm tunnel of golden light. I did not see my deceased grandmother sitting in a rocking chair with a smile on her face, waving me back toward the living. What I experienced was something that I have spent 2 full years trying to find language for, and I am still not sure the language exists. But I will try. The moment my body gave out, there was a period of absolute nothingness that I cannot measure. Not darkness, because darkness is still something. Not silence, because silence is still the absence of sound, which means sound exists somewhere nearby. This was a state that preceded all categories. I was not there. And then, without transition, without a door or a hallway or a bridge, I was somewhere else entirely. The first thing I became aware of was weight, not physical weight. I had no body. But there was a pressure, a gravitational pull that had nothing to do with mass and everything to do with consequence. It was the weight of being known completely. Every layer I had ever built around myself, every careful construction, every curated version of Tarvanek Saluri that I had presented to the world, they were gone. Not stripped away slowly the way you peel an orange. Gone instantly, the way a shadow disappears when you turn the light directly on it. What remained was everything I had actually done, not how I had explained it to myself afterward, not the softened version I had narrated in my own head to keep my conscience manageable. The actual thing, the true texture of every choice. And I want to tell you something that I have never told anyone in quite this way. There is a profound horror in being seen without your explanations. We spend our entire lives inside the story we tell about ourselves. We are always the reasonable one, the one who was provoked, the one who meant well, the one who would have done better if circumstances had been different. That story, that constant low-level editorial we run in our own heads, it is the most powerful drug available to human beings. I had been addicted to mine for 4 decades. In that place, the drug was gone, and what I saw without it was not a monster. That would have been easier in a strange way. What I saw was something more unbearable, which was a man who had been given every opportunity to become something worth becoming, and who had consistently, deliberately, knowingly chosen the smaller, darker, easier path. Not in catastrophic ways. That is the part that should frighten you most if you are listening carefully. Not in ways that would make the evening news. In the quiet, daily, accumulating ways that most of us never bother to examine because they do not feel dramatic enough to take seriously. I had chosen comfort over honesty so many times that it had become invisible to me. I had chosen the appearance of righteousness over the actual practice of it so consistently that I had genuinely begun to confuse the two. I had looked at the suffering of people near me and found sophisticated reasons why it was not my responsibility. I had used the language of faith as a shield against its demands. None of this felt like evil when I was doing it. That is the architecture of the thing I am trying to describe. It did not feel like walking toward darkness. It felt like standing still. But in that place, I understood something that no lecture, no book, no sermon had ever managed to deposit in me at any real depth. Standing still, when you have been given legs and shown the direction, is not neutral. It is a choice, and choices compound. Then the weight increased. I do not know how else to describe the transition except to say that something shifted in the quality of where I was. The pressure that had been uncomfortable became something I have no honest word for. The closest I can come is to say that I became aware of a direction, a below, not below in the sense of a physical location, but below in the sense of a fundamental orientation. And I understood without being told that this was where certain things went. Not all things. Specific things. Things like what I had made of myself. I want to be precise here, because I am not a man who uses words carelessly, or at least I am trying to become one. I am not telling you that a figure with a pitchfork pointed at me. I am not describing a cartoonish geography of fire and brimstone that you can comfortably dismiss because it sounds like a medieval painting. What I am describing is worse than that, because it was completely real in a way that nothing in my physical life has ever been completely real. It was real the way mathematics is real, not because someone decided it would be, because it could not be otherwise. I became aware that there is a state of existence that is the precise and inevitable result of a specific kind of life, not a punishment administered by an angry authority, a consequence that flows from cause the way heat flows from fire. You do not need someone to decide that fire burns you. It burns you because of what fire is and what you are. The reality I glimpsed in that direction, in that below, was of that same character. It was not waiting to receive me because it had been assigned to receive me. It was waiting because of what I had become, and it and I had a natural correspondence, the way a key corresponds to the lock it was made for. And then I felt something that I have thought about every single day since I came back, and that I expect to think about every day for the rest of my life. I felt what it would be like to arrive there permanently, not the pain of it. I want to be honest. I cannot tell you with precision what the sensory experience of that place would be, because I did not go all the way. But I felt the loss. I felt the specific texture of permanent separation from everything that the word light means when you use it not to describe photons, but to describe the opposite of what I was facing. And the loss was not like grief, which still contains the warmth of having once had the thing you lost. This was the loss of a man who realizes he was given access to something infinite and spent his entire allocation of time building a very small, very comfortable room and calling it a life. That is what I felt. And in that moment, something that I can only describe as an intervention occurred. Not a voice, not a vision, but a communication that bypassed the mechanisms of language entirely and arrived as pure understanding. A single idea, delivered with a clarity that made everything I had ever called clarity seem like trying to read in a dark room. You can still turn around. That was it. No elaboration, no conditions listed, no procedural instructions. Just that. You can still turn around. And I want to tell you something about those words that I think is important. They were not warm. I had expected, in the half second that I processed them, that such a communication would feel like an embrace. It did not. It felt like the truth feels when you have been avoiding it for a long time, and it finally catches you in a place where there is nowhere left to run. It felt like mercy, but mercy in its actual form, which is not softness. Mercy in its actual form is the decision to give someone what they need rather than what their choices have earned them. I came back. There was no cinematic return, no slow brightening of awareness. I was in that place, and then I was choking on an oxygen mask while a paramedic with a wide forehead and kind eyes told me to breathe slowly. Just breathe slowly. You are okay. You are back. But I was not the same Tarvanek who had fallen in the kitchen. The first thing I did, when I had enough breath and enough control of my hands, was reach for Orvetha, who was standing in the corner of the room looking like she had aged 5 years in the past 40 minutes. I reached for her hand and I said, "Thank you." And I meant it in a register I had never used the phrase before. Not the social reflex of thank you, the real one. The one that understands that a person is a universe, and you have just been saved by one. She cried. I cried. The paramedic pretended to check something on his clipboard. In the weeks that followed, I did something I had never done in 43 years of calling myself a Muslim. I sat down with the understanding I had been given, not the theology I had inherited, not the cultural furniture I had grown up around, but the actual understanding, and I asked myself what a life lived in genuine correspondence with it would look like. The answer was uncomfortable in every direction. It meant having a conversation with my wife that I had been postponing for 11 years, not because I needed to confess every detail of everything I had hidden, but because the particular form of concealment I had practiced had created a distance between us that neither of us named, but both of us lived inside, and that distance was a form of theft. I had stolen her opportunity to be in a real marriage. When I told her this, not all of it, but enough, the part that was structurally true, she did not react the way I had always imagined she would react, which was why I had always avoided it. She sat very quietly for a long time, and then she said, "I know there are things I have also not told you," and we started there. We are still married. We are, for the first time in a very long time, actually married. It meant looking at the people I had categorized as not my responsibility, and understanding that the categorization itself was the problem. There is a man in my neighborhood named Ulvrecht Passini, who had been living in a situation of real hardship for years, while I lived 3 streets away, and found sophisticated reasons why involvement was complicated. I got involved. It was complicated. It was also the most useful I have ever been to another human being. It meant going back to the practice of my faith, not as a coat I put on for cold weather, but as a discipline that I submitted to even on the days when it was inconvenient, especially on those days, because I had learned in the most direct way available to a human being that the inconvenient days are the ones that actually build what you are. I am not telling you I became a saint. I want to be very clear about this, because one of the things I am most suspicious of in stories like mine is the implication that the person who came back was perfected by the experience. I was not. I still reach for the easier explanation. I still feel the pull toward comfort. I still have mornings where I look at the demands of trying to be genuinely good and feel a fatigue that the word tired does not quite cover. But here is what is permanently different. I cannot anymore pretend that the small choices do not matter. That is the gift, if you want to call it that, and also the weight that I carry, because I now know with a certainty that is not belief, but something closer to the way you know you are holding a hot object, that every single ordinary day is a day of construction. You are building something with it. The question is not whether. The question is what. I have met people since this experience who hear stories like mine, and their first question is about the mechanics. Was it real, or was it a hallucination? Was it oxygen deprivation creating narrative from random neural firing? Was it the brain's emergency storytelling system? I understand the question. I used to be the kind of person who would have asked it. What I will say is this. I do not think the question goes where people think it goes. Because even if everything I experienced was generated by my own mind in extremity, what my mind generated was a completely accurate account of who I had been and what it had cost. The assessment was not flattering, and it was not wrong. I could not find an error in it. And a tool that shows you a true picture of yourself, regardless of the mechanism by which it shows you, is a tool that deserves to be taken seriously. But I do not think that is what it was. I think I was somewhere real. I think the correspondence I felt between what I had made of myself and that direction, that below, was not a metaphor my synapses invented. I think it was information, and I think information of that kind, delivered at that cost, deserves to be acted on. Which brings me to the part of this story that I most want you to carry with you when you close this video and go back to your day. You do not have to die to turn around. That is the thing I would most like to give you, if I could give you anything. I needed to die to see clearly, but the seeing is available without the dying. Every tradition of genuine wisdom that has ever existed on this planet has been trying to give people access to that clarity without requiring them to stop breathing first. The clarity is, what you do with ordinary Tuesday mornings is what you are. The accumulation of small choices is the architecture of a life, and the direction of that architecture is not fixed until the moment it is fixed, which is a moment none of us is given advance notice of. My heart stopped on a Tuesday morning while I was reaching for a glass. Orvetha Camps knocked on my door at the right moment. The paramedics arrived in 7 minutes. I came back. None of these things were guaranteed. Not one of them. And every version of Tuesday morning that I had previously treated as an obstacle between me and the weekend was, in fact, an opportunity of a kind I had never learned to see. I see it now, not perfectly, not without effort, not without the days when the old habits pull at me with a familiarity that is its own kind of seduction. But I see it. Tarvanek Saluri died on a Tuesday in his kitchen, and came back to a life he finally understood was worth the full weight of his attention. That is the whole story. Or rather, it is the beginning of a story that I am still living, one ordinary day at a time, with the specific and irreplaceable awareness that ordinary days are the only kind there are, and that they are more than enough to work with, if you actually work with them. If this account reached something in you, something that recognized itself or asked a question it had been avoiding, I would ask you not to let that moment dissolve the way important moments tend to dissolve when we walk away from them and back into the noise. Write something down. Make one different choice today than you would have made yesterday. Call the person you have been meaning to call. Have the conversation you have been engineering reasons to avoid. Look at your ordinary Tuesday morning and ask yourself honestly what you are building with it. And if you want to hear more, if you want to stay in a conversation about what it actually means to live as though this one life is the extraordinary and temporary gift that it is, then subscribe to this channel. Stay close. I am not a preacher. I am not a guru. I am a man who was shown something and is trying, imperfectly and publicly, to live accordingly. Come back next week. Bring your questions. Bring your doubts. Bring your ordinary Tuesday morning. We have work to do.